Okay, so today I want to speak to you about photodynamic therapy. In many of your countries, it's probably well known to you about this subject. It's called photodynamic therapy, sometimes called photobiomodulation, sometimes called low-level laser therapy. In my country, in Australia, it's not that well known, and I will go through the research about how it's applied in different areas and using different products. This is me. I actually have a background as a laser therapist and working in skin rejuvenation. I have a PhD in the top secret chemical warfare trials in Australia during the Second World War, which we understand was the origin of chemotherapy now. And I'm the president of the Australian Apitherapy Association. And I do various things here in Australia to do with natural medicine. So this is a diagram of what photodynamic therapy is. It actually is a type of treatment where a photosensitizer is delivered to somebody either topically or intravenously or by consuming a liquid, depending on the type of treatment. And what happens is the photosensitizer creates what's called an excited state. If in the case of cancer, for example, the tumors absorb the chemical, and when it's exposed to light, it creates an excited state and generates singlet oxygen, which actually has the effect of imploding tumors. So quite non-toxically, using a photosensitizer and light, it's possible to encourage the tumors themselves to implode. Now, it's related to what evolutionary biologists believe is something in our mitochondria where there's a chloroplast or something that reacts to color that causes us to have this chemical reaction. And it's believed to be linked to primitive protobacteria. One of the chemicals that was used for photodynamic therapy is chlorophyll. So it's almost like, the way I think of it in a simplistic way, it's almost like we have the capacity to photosynthesize if we have the right kind of chemical and light together, just the way a plant does, which is kind of how we generate vitamin D. This is a diagram, sorry to give you so many diagrams up front, but this is a diagram of how photodynamic therapy works. So up here, there's been a lot of research in the different wavelengths of light, and they're actually depicted in colors. So some photosensitizers respond to in this spectrum, in the blue spectrum, 450. Others react in the 650 to 700, even just have been working in this space for many decades can actually work out, prescribe which wavelength can be used in response to which photosensitizer. So the notion of photodynamic therapy is actually quite ancient. You'll see here from Egyptian hieroglyphs that for health and medicine, and they knew about the use of certain plants that could be used for health. So they would use some plants that we would commonly call Queen Anne's lace or St. John's wort, for example, knowing that if they went into the sun using these plants, they would have a treatment. So they might use it for a skin disease or other things. I guess we don't know very much about that, but we do know that photodynamic therapy is actually an ancient type of treatment. And actually in 1895, Niels Ryberg Finsen worked out that using ultraviolet light, they could actually cure some diseases like lupus And he won the Nobel Prize for this, and it caused a great deal of interest in using light for medicine.
Sorry, Bridget. I think you are at the first slide.
Ah,
yes.
Okay.
Please do.
Can you see this now?
First slide, only the first.
Ancient Egypt, yes. I apologize. So this is the diagram. This is a diagram of how photodynamic therapy works. It's to do with encouraging an excited state in molecules within our body that respond to light when they're encouraged by a photosensitizer. And it's believed that it's an ancient chemical process in our bodies to do with endosymbiosis in the mitochondria. And this is, I'm sorry you couldn't see this before when I was showing it. This is a diagram of the levels of light that are used in photodynamic therapy. So as I was saying, scientists have worked out that which types of chemicals respond to different wavelengths. Some respond very well in the 450 band, which is blue light. The green 550, 650 to 800 is the red light band. And they've done a lot of research on how this can be applied for various treatments. And the notion is that once there's been a photosensitizer consumed or injected or applied topically as an ointment, that the exposure to one of these bands of light can actually cause apoptosis by encouraging reactive oxygen species, meaning that a tumor or even bacteria can respond to this exposure to light in the presence of a photosensitizer and cause cell death or apoptosis of the tumor or the cell that we're looking to eradicate. This is a picture of how photodynamic therapy was used in ancient Egypt. And as I was saying, the Egyptians believed that the sun had a great impact on our health, and they also learned to use plants in association with the sun to do their own form of photodynamic therapy. This is Niels Ryberg Finsen, who won the Nobel Prize in 1903, when he and his wife did a lot of work on lupus using ultraviolet light. And they had a lot of success in reversing this disease, which created a lot of interest in using light for medicine. And in the decades that have followed, there's been a lot of research on using light in various forms for various types of illnesses. So these are some of the plants that can be used in photodynamic therapy: Hypericum perforatum, St. John's wort, Curcuma longa, turmeric, and Amy majus, which is sometimes called bishop's weed, or here in Australia we call it Queen Anne's lace. It's believed that the ancient Egyptians used to use Queen Anne's lace or a variety of this plant in their treatment because it's native to the Nile River Valley and was easily accessed there. The photodynamic therapy of hypericin is because of its high cell uptake due to lipophilicity. It's a molecule that requires a carrier in the form of liposomes or nanoparticles. It's been used since ancient times, but there's a lot of research now in different modes of delivery of hypericin, sometimes with nanomaterials. It's interesting that photosensitizers have now gone through a few generations in the decades of work on photodynamic therapy. And what's very interesting is that the researchers keep coming back to these plants. So I guess as science has evolved and we have different ways of processing them and accessing the active molecules that do this work, They are still of great interest. And later in my presentation, I'll speak about other types of herbs or plants that are being researched for medicine in mind. This one's not a very clear diagram. I apologize for that, but it is a chart of the different photosensitizers that are used for different types of treatment. So there's one called porphyrin, which is used for lung and esophagus cancer. There's one called aminovalunic acid, which is commonly referred to as ALA. That's actually quite commonly used for topical applications for skin cancer. And here in Australia, that's in use as a cream by dermatologists for people with basal cell carcinoma. You can apply the cream, and people are encouraged to go in the sun to have a form of photodynamic therapy. But it can also be used internally for bladder cancer and also in the throat for esophageal cancer using photodynamic therapy. And further down the chart, there are photosensitizers that come from chlorophyll. One's called chlorin E6. There are various combinations of photosensitizers that come from chlorophyll. As I was saying before, that's because chlorophyll enables this chemical reaction we want to see in photodynamic therapy, where the cells absorb, particularly tumor cells will absorb the photosensitizer after a period of time, sometimes an hour, sometimes 24 hours, depending on the treatment. And then when exposed directly to light, the tumor cells fluoresce and encourage reactive oxygen species, which is a way of encouraging the tumors to quite naturally implode. And the treatment can be done multiple times, and it's regarded as not toxic as the way we understand radiotherapy and chemotherapy to be. This is a fairly gruesome picture of a woman with advanced Bellodi's breast cancer. This woman received radiotherapy for a decade. And as you can see, it wasn't successful. This woman didn't receive photodynamic therapy because it wasn't available to her. But as you can see, the tumors are very well on the surface. And I suppose I wanted to show this slide to show this is how we currently treat people when these types of treatments are not available to them. This is a picture of a mouse receiving an experimental form of photodynamic therapy. And this picture is interesting because it shows that the light is delivered by fiber optic cable. So the advancement of lasers meant that photodynamic therapy went to a new level. Until lasers were introduced and it was possible to attach a fiber optic cable to insert the light, which can be done with endoscopes internally. And say for esophageal cancer, it can be done by putting a fiber optic cable like this into the throat. Or there are types of devices that have been developed where the light can be placed internally according to where it occurs. That there is actually quite a lot of photodynamic therapy used in brain surgery because it's possible to isolate a tumor that way and assists with the surgery. So yeah, this is just an interesting example of see how the light is seen once it's inserted into the mouse. So this is another picture of laser light, this time green light on a fiber optic cable. And this is a diagram of how the photodynamic therapy is used in relation to cancer. So on malignant or even non-malignant tumors, it's possible to apply the photosensitizer topically or intravenously, or even by consuming the type of photosensitizer depending on the delivery. There are many different studies on different ways to use a photosensitizer and the combination of light. a very interesting method which has come out of Germany, a very famous device called the Weber medical device, is an intravenous type of photodynamic therapy. You can see here, this is the diagram of how this laser can actually deliver, I think, 4 types of light, red, green, blue, yellow. From memory, I think green is very effective against parasites. So it's been popularly used for the treatment of Lyme disease. The red light is also helpful for various treatments. And the yellow light is believed to be very helpful for depression. And I think this is commonly used in Germany. Some practitioners in America have these. I think there's some in Canada. There's starting to be some in Australia, although Australia doesn't recognize this treatment. But it is a very innovative and very interesting way of delivering photodynamic therapy. This is a picture of what a cancer cell looks like under photodynamic therapy. This is from the American National Cancer Institute. So once the tumor has absorbed the photosensitizer and then is exposed to light, it actually phosphoresces like this. So it can be seen to flash. So the practitioner can see that the treatment has been successful. And thereafter, I guess it's an issue of waiting to see what happens. It's understood that this treatment can be delivered repeatedly. Unlike with radiotherapy, which is known to be toxic, this treatment is not a toxic treatment, and it has been recorded to be very successful for some quite advanced forms of cancer, and is still largely regarded as experimental in some countries, but other countries have taken it up and use it routinely. So this is the process. The person receives a photosensitizer. In some cases, they wait 24 or 72 hours for the cancer cells to absorb the photosensitizer, depending on the type of treatment. The cancer cells then absorb the light, and then the light causes the photosensitizer to make a form of programmed cell death of the cancer cells. So that's the process. And this is another diagram of the mechanism of action. So once the light is delivered, singlet oxygen species are encouraged. And then there is vascular damage and programmed cell death of the tumor. This is a picture of somebody receiving photodynamic therapy from a laser. This is the type of laser that's actually, I should say, not what we would regard as a hot laser. These lasers are actually cool to the touch. I guess that's why they're called low-level lasers, that they don't burn as the higher level lasers do when you're doing more traditional treatments on the surface, or using a laser to cut, for example. These lasers can be exposed like this without burning the person. But actually what's happening with photodynamic therapy is there's a chemical reaction inside the body to do specifically with the area being treated. Japan on using photodynamic therapy on esophageal cancer. And this is a picture of, this is where the tumor occurs. Once the person was exposed to photodynamic therapy, the light was placed in their throat and the tumor was seen to be eradicated. This is actually a photograph of that process. So this is before the treatment, and this is the practice of photodynamic therapy. And after 10 weeks, it's shown that there is no tumor. So normally esophageal cancer is regarded as very difficult to treat. That's a very sensitive area to be using surgery in, and many people have had quite debilitating treatments. This is a process where a light on a fiber optic cable can be delivered to the throat to treat this area. And as you can see, it's been shown to be very successful in this Japanese work, and I believe it's in practice in Japan now. So photodynamic therapy can also work on microbes and to kill bacteria, fungi, and viruses. So this is a picture of somebody who received photodynamic therapy for a serious ulcer that was not responding to antibiotics. So it's a similar process. The photosensitizer is applied, the light is applied, and the wound is seen to be healed. So the reactive oxygen species generated by the PDT can deactivate several classes of microbes, including gram-negative bacteria. And this is an exciting prospect in the face of what we all understand to be the serious problem of antibiotic resistance, which is becoming a problem worldwide. Another diagram of how photodynamic therapy works. The focus of the treatment occurs. The molecules are excited by the light, fluorescence occurs, and then there is a process of encouraging singlet oxygen to actually lead to the damage of the tumor or the bacteria that's the focus of the treatment. So here's it's quite a difficult treatment to explain. So I guess I've put lots of diagrams in to explain how it works. And these are the types of light that can be used in relation to this treatment, depending on the photosensitizer and the type of treatment that is required. So there's a lot of work on chlorophyll because of what I was describing earlier about what we all understand to be chlorophyll's photosensitive action. Excuse me. So cyanobacteria are a promising source of photosensitizers to use in photodynamic therapy, and they are very good at encouraging autophagy and apoptosis in photodynamic therapy. And because they are aqueous, they can be water soluble, and they are successfully treated in a 600 to 670 nanometer light range. Another one that's an interesting one for photodynamic therapy is riboflavin, vitamin B2, in leafy vegetables, mushrooms, and there's a lot of work being done on riboflavin PDT. So here's some other examples of molecules from natural products: berberine, curcumin, and anthraquinones, sorrelin, hypericin from St. John's wort, and furanocoumarins. And these are the wavelengths that occur. There are peak wavelengths where photodynamic therapy is most active, depending on the type of photosensitizer being used. So there have been 3 generations of photosensitizers since this has been studied: the hematoporphyrins, porphyrin-like compounds, and research into what type of products can be used for this treatment. So this is a rundown of what is required in a photosensitizer: that it should selectively accumulate in the neoplastic or tumorous tissue, that it should be readily available as a pure compound. It should have phototoxic effects it should not have the phototoxic effects in healthy tissue. That means the healthy tissue won't be affected when the tumor absorbs the photosensitizer and is exposed to light. So it's a way of isolating the damaged tissue from the healthy tissue, and that it should be characterized by an ability to absorb this light in the 600 to 800 nanometer wavelength. And it shouldn't overlap with the absorption bands of endogenous dyes such as melanin and hemoglobin. And it should react efficiently with light to generate singlet oxygen or radicals to implode the tumor. And it should have the right type of pharmacokinetic products. It shouldn't have side effects, and it should be of low toxicity to be easily excreted from the body after the treatment. So some photosensitizers have been found to stay in the body for quite a long time, which means the early photosensitizers people found would stay in the body for up to a month, and you would remain very sensitive to light. And so some treatments were carried out where the person had to be kept in a dark room for a long time until the photosensitizer left their body. This has probably inhibited the use of photodynamic therapy until photosensitizers are found where they can more readily predict how long the chemical will stay in the body and enable the person to carry on their normal life after the treatment without having to go to the extremes of staying out of the light. So this is recent research coming out of Poland into different plants that can be used for photodynamic therapy. And it's very interesting. They explored many types of plants. Some of them will be familiar to you. Some of the herbalists in the group will be very familiar with Albizia and some of the other plants that are listed here. And they've been studied to see if these plants actually deliver on the list of what they need a photosensitizer to do. So the Luminitza, which is commonly known as the white flowered black mangrove, is one that's being studied. And the Albizia, as I said, and this other Arabidia chica, which I believe is from the Amazon. Here's a photo of somebody having photodynamic therapy. As you can see, the laser light on the fiber optic cable, it's quite exciting to look at visually. But it is interesting to consider that this type of treatment may be more widely used as a non-toxic version of radiotherapy, if you like. And it's exciting to think that research is carrying on into different plant materials to be used as photosensitizers. And I think a lot more is being understood about the delivery of photosensitizers and light as a way to treat serious illnesses such as cancer. And I'm personally going to continue to study this and try and find places that deliver it. When I go to China, I'll be visiting hospitals where they actually use photodynamic therapy with traditional Chinese herbs, which is very exciting and difficult for us to access unless we go to the Chinese hospitals where this is being delivered. So I've been working hard to try and find out how to do that. And I hope to have more information after my present trip. Here is a list of my references, and I'm very happy to share these with anyone who would like to see them. I hope that was